Mr. Gallagher. Welcome. Thank you for being here for the Chamber of Commerce 2026 Congressional Candidate Forum. We're looking forward to talking to you today.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
My
thanks
name
for having
is Dorian. I'm a business owner here in downtown Chico. I was raised in this community. I'm here with some wonderful people today. I'll pass it around for some introductions.
Good morning, James. Mark Breckenridge, local business owner, farmer, and Chico Chamber of Commerce member and board of director.
And Brandon Slater, past chair of the Chamber of Commerce, also owner of Slater and Son Construction.
And I know you guys, so no need for a big intro. But yeah,
for our guests,
Awesome. But for the big intro, I think we'll kick it to you. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, why you're running, and who you are, your family, and whatnot?
Yeah. So James Gallagher, likewise grew up in this area, in the Sacramento Valley. I love this area. I'm a sixth generation Californian. My ancestors came here because this was the California dream. This was the place to be, and we liked it, I guess. So we stayed. I've served in public office for 12 years now in the state assembly, representing this area. I've loved every minute of that. Not that there wasn't certain frustrating parts,
Sure.
especially in Sacramento, but I've loved that ability to be a voice for our people and all the communities that I represent, and try and find positive ways forward for those people. And so I've enjoyed doing that. I'm now running for Congress, and wasn't expecting that. We lost our Congressman Doug LaMalfa earlier this year, and that's been really tough. He was a mentor of mine and somebody that I did a lot of work with, on all these issues, served together. But I ultimately decided that I needed to step up and fill that void, fill that gap. And so I've been on the campaign trail now for 4 months now, and it's been good. I've been really just listening to people. I think also the other thing that people should know about me is, family man myself. I'm, married to my wife, Jana, coming up on 23 years. We have 5 children, ranging from 18 to 9. So, it's always crazy, but it's good. And again, I just think like a lot of families in this region, we're, want something better for the next generation. So, that's a big focus as well. 6
generations.
Yeah.
Wow. What kind of perspective does that give you being here for so long?
I think that whether you've been here, multiple generations or you just came here, I think you fall in love with this place. Tom Van Overbeck, city councilman in Chico, tells that story about how he, when he first came here, it just reminded him so much of growing up in Modesto, and I think we've always really had that, like, especially in a lot of our communities, Chico and so many others, it still feels like a small town. There's a lot of connectedness. There's a lot of, businesses that have been around. And so, look, I think it gives me that perspective of like how everything really is connected, and how there's been a lot of, legacy built into these communities too. And I think that's something worth preserving and worth really building upon, right? I mean, I think it gives us a really good foundation. And so that's something I've always been really proud to be part of.
So what did you do, or what do you do, or what did you used to do before you had a whole bunch of kids and became a politician and all of that for fun?
What do you mean? I still have fun. It's not like I don't have fun. I love to fish. That's one thing. So I mean, I grew up fly fishing. Learned to fly fish actually, up out of Magalia on the West Branch of the Feather River.
Love that.
My dad and like his best friend, always went up there in the summers, and so one of my fondest memories as a kid is going up there and fly fishing and catching hopefully catching that brown in the big dark hole up there. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, my in-laws have there's like about 6 cabins just past the turnoff for Philbrook on the West Branch there, and my in-laws are the second cabin there. So I've fished. I learned how to fly fish on that same creek. So.
My 6-year-old just caught her first bluegill at Horseshoe Lake
Okay.
last weekend. Yeah. It's great.
See the connectedness.
Yeah.
Right? And so
look.
people share those experiences. So I do love to fish. That's something I like to do for fun. Before I got into politics, I'm an attorney and also a farmer, and so we work the land. A lot of my clients are farmers and small business people, so that's something I've always had a passion for as well, and the outdoors. Just like also a hunter as well, and if I can be outside, hiking around, getting out into sort of the back country, that's definitely a good day for me. Yeah.
It's a man after my own heart right there. James, so, being from a farm family and a lawyer also, what, got you to want to, especially like from the local level to where you're at now, who inspired you to get into the political realm?
My grandfather, is probably the first person that comes to mind. Growing up, he was actually a Democrat. He grew up as a Democrat. And the story he would tell is that actually, I guess during the second Pat Brown administration, he decided that he was a Republican. And he was a Reagan Republican, essentially. Like, he really liked Ronald Reagan, was really inspired by him. And so growing up, my grandfather was really involved in politics, and he ran for county supervisor, and served in that role at one point. And I remember that as a kid, like, going to some of his campaign events, like going to the campaign headquarters. I can remember as a kid, like watching like presidential debates on TV and just like being, be really interested in that. I mean, I think probably a lot of my friends at the time thought I was kind of a dork for like, being interested in that kind of thing. But I liked history. I liked reading about different leaders, Abraham Lincoln, and others that just, so for me, even at a young age, like I felt a calling towards, this kind of stuff that, and my grandfather used to always say, like, hey, we have a real duty to like give back to the community and that the good things of this community they're not automatic, that everybody needs to give in some way. And he also used to always say, God gave you, one mouth and 2 ears for a reason, to listen twice as much as you talk. And I feel like sometimes I've listened to that advice. I feel like I mostly have listened to that advice, but there are times I probably need to hear it again, and I hear those words, come up in my mind. So, yeah, my grandfather was a really big influence on me in terms of inspiring me into public service. Nice.
Yeah, you mentioned Doug LaMalfa earlier, your predecessor. What's one thing that he really championed that you'll continue to lean into, that's something that was, kind of close to his heart, that you'll continue to like really, be like, oh, that was a Doug thing, and I'm going to make sure I continue that on?
To Doug, like, I think it was really important to get to every community and be at like, so many different community events, and not necessarily, to be there to be like the center of attention in any way. Like, I think he loved being there, being a part of it, and then kind of hearing what people were concerned about and then taking that back. And I don't think there's anyone, I mean, there'll never be another Doug LaMalfa. I don't think there's anyone that did that as well as he did, in terms of just really making sure that he got to every place and really kind of entering in and like becoming a part of every community, and then being able to take that back. But that's certainly something I really aspire to, is that kind of represent. I don't know how he did it time wise, and
Right.
I've joked on like he drove really fast. That's true, and he had a Mustang, so he definitely maybe had the means to do that. But just man, he would do things like be in 3 parades in one day, and I don't know how he managed his time so well to do that. but that's one. I mean, and he was a huge champion of water and water infrastructure and water management and really trying to get that right. And he knew a whole lot. I mean, he advised a lot of different people about the water system and the changes that he made. Even Gavin Newsom, like famously, like had Gavin Newsom in his office, sat him down like right underneath the state of Jefferson flag that was in his office, and then like pulled out all these maps and was just like, hey man, here's the plumbing, right? Mm-hmm. And here's what we need to do to make this work better. And I think that was something he was also just really good at, and I certainly want to continue that.
Yeah, water is one of those crazy things because it's this balance of like, well, it's mine because it's here on my property and all the water rights, but it's like, oh, if you suck too much water, then now you're bothering your neighbor, and it's like, oh well, it's really a community resource. And yeah, how do you balance that to get it where it's like, yeah.
No, it's good. I mean, it's the lifeblood, man. It's the lifeblood of all of our communities. It's really what I think makes us prosperous, right? Is water, right? In the North State. But really throughout California, I mean, without water and the projects that we built, California wouldn't be what it is today, right? And so, we need to think about both the micro and the macro, of our water resource. Part of that is like protecting water rights because, if those get undermined, our water that is for the the North, right, and for our communities could get undermined, and so you do need to protect that water rights system, that helps ensure that our water stays in our communities, but you also need to ensure and steward that water resource in a way that is going to be sustainable for the long term, right? And I think like we actually have done that really well in the North and actually could show others how to do the same thing. And part of it is investing in surface water storage. Because when you do that, you have that water, you use it on the landscape in your farms and your, in agriculture. That water then percolates down into the groundwater, replenishes the groundwater aquifers, and then we have strong aquifers, for the future, right? And you almost need to continue that, right? If all water is just flowing straight out and there's no capture of that and there's no reuse of that in many different ways, you don't get that same thing, right? This is one of the reasons why like the State Water Board has this kind of intense policy of what they call unimpaired flow, this letting water flow down, no diversions, just let more water flow down the river and the stream. And they say, oh, that's going to be better for fish and other things. Well, actually, like what we're finding is that's not actually true, because if the fish don't have habitat, if they don't have rearing places, right? If they don't have gravel beds and things like, and what we found in the rice, like as water spreads out over rice fields, it creates fish food that goes back into the system that helps juvenile salmon grow. Like, so keeping water on the landscape is really important for multiple, benefits. So that's something I think we need to have more of a conversation about and educate people about, right? Because I think it does get into this zero-sum game a lot of the time. To your point, Brandon, and we got to, figure out a better way forward on that, I think.
Yeah, and sites was, you didn't specifically mention it, but man, being in a minority in California, how did you? Yeah, and that was like, I feel like you worked on that. Like I remember first talking about, that was one of the first times I met you, Valley Contractors Exchange meeting, and you were asking me about like skilled and trained workforce and how's that going to apply. And anyways, how did you get that? It's not built yet, but it seems like it's at least, I wish we were
moving a lot faster on that. But, I remember the first time I ever went out to the Sides Valley, and I was actually working for Doug at the time. I'd been in his district office, and they did a tour out there. And I went out there, and there was a gal, Mary Wells, who's a landowner out there, and she was talking about the Sides Valley and how this is like, a perfect place to, store water. And she goes, hey, my land's actually going to end up underwater. if we do this project, right? And I've had this, this has been in my family for multiple generations, right? But she says water, is the lifeblood of our communities, and we need more storage. And she just had this really eloquent way of explaining like how important this really was, and that she was willing, to basically give up her property, right, to, provide for this place to store more water and replenish aquifers and have more water for all the things that we need, in the North State. And so that was, I think that was like 2002, right? So that was a long time ago, over 20 years ago. And now we're closer than ever. We have the money, through the efforts of Doug at the federal level, and then we've done some really good work at the state level. We have the money. The money's there to build this project. We've been moving through the bureaucracy. But it would be so important because that, again, you have that water, it'd be 1.5 million acre feet of water that we could store in that valley. We could use it for operation and management on flood flows, on better managing for actually fish, downstream, and ensure that people have water that they need in towns, cities, farms, right, throughout the state. Because it'd be part of this overall state water project that we operate with Oroville Dam, and Bullard's Bar in Yuba County. All these things would come together to bring abundance. That's a big word people are using now, abundance, right? But I think it's always storage is part of that. Let's have more water, right, that we can use for all of those different needs in California. And so that's why it's so important. I mean, and we need to get it done. Right now, we're in that bureaucracy trying to break through to get the project off the ground, but I think we're pretty close.
It feels like it's really close. So
it's amazing how we've gone like full circle on the water, especially in agriculture, as you mentioned, with rice is bad, and now it's like we're the California Rice Commission, Fish and Wildlife are doing the salmon studies, and out of the Conway Ranch and other places, and then also, it started to save water. We went from flood irrigation in the fields to micros to drip, and now UC Davis is doing studies back on flood irrigation to put water recharge back in the ground. So it's interesting on that. James, you talk a lot about Doug and everything he's done for the community, and the way he's done it. What are like something that if you were elected that you would do different possibly?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, everybody is different, right? So, Doug and I are not the same guy, and there's, maybe approaches that I take that are, that are going to be different, ways that I handle situations that are going to be different. And that's all good. I think what it is that we have the same spirit, right? Which is, hey, let's make sure that we're fighting for our communities and making sure that they're represented, that they have a voice. I think the way that I've tried to approach things in Sacramento, for example, and it's the same way I would approach it in Washington, D.C., is, there's some things you just don't compromise on, and that you go in there and you fight for, and you got to say, look, this is what my community needs, and I'm going to be, that, kind of brick wall on that issue. Like I'm not going to, move. Like I need you guys to understand what's going on here, and yet still having the ability to work with people, across the aisle and be able to get things done. And I have been able to do that, it's an approach I've taken. And look, I think the other thing that I really do is I speak truth. I come into those halls and I'm not going to allow things that are false, right, to be, just allowed to, stand. I want to stand against that. I want to call that out. And then, but at the same time, like you have the ability to, and I've found this a lot. You sometimes when you speak that truth afterwards, you have people coming up to you and saying, you know what, you're right. And let's get past some of the party and some of the, I guess, entrenched interest and like work on that issue, and let's try and make things better. And I found that we've been able to make breakthroughs like on water, on sites maybe being one of those things, but in other areas as well, and so like forestry and wildfire, like that's a huge one that I think we've made a lot of progress on. That there was a mentality like we should do nothing in the forests, right? And now like there's much more of a focus on no, we need to better manage our forests, through things like thinning, like mechanical thinning, like removing brush and and what he wastes, and then prescribe fire, right? Using prescribed fire to like clear out a lot of these areas. Whereas in the past, there was almost like a religion of don't touch the forest at all. Well, now people have seen like that kind of policy, had devastating effects from a wildfire standpoint. And so we had to speak the truth about, hey, this isn't working and this is wrong, and here's what we should do to help. And then you find, common ground on issues where you can move that ball forward. So I want to continue to work on things like that, and I think we have, we've shown that we can do that, and I think I can do that in Washington, D.C. as well.
So on that subject, what would a successful term as a congressman look like for you?
Yeah, let's get sites started. Let's really move the ball on the pace and scale of forestry management, funding, but also like removing some of the barriers, changing some of the laws, reforming some of the policies at the Forest Service to make sure that we can do a lot more of that. It was because we ultimately need to do millions of acres of treatment, to really make our communities safe, right? We start by, around vulnerable communities doing the work, but that needs to kind of spread out, make sure we're really properly managing this public resource. So that needs to be, done in earnest. And then I think rural healthcare, getting Glenn Medical Center reopened. A lot of people don't know, but Doug and I actually helped keep Glenn Medical Center open back in 2016. It was on the verge of closure. A private group came in, American Advanced Healthcare. They took over the hospital. We worked with the agencies to make sure that, all of the permitting and everything was good to move forward. And we kept that hospital open. It closed largely because of bad policy, one being this critical access designation where they interpreted it as, hey, it was too close to Colusa to qualify. And, it's been reported on, but there was all kinds of crazy reasons why that was decided by the agency that weren't really accurate about the distances between those hospitals. Long story short, Doug worked with Adam Schiff and got that critical access designation back. Now we need to, make sure we have the funding to get it reopened. And there and again, Doug helped ensure in H.R. 1 that $50 billion was set aside for rural health care. About $234 million has been allocated now to California. Let's make sure we get that money. There's a distressed hospital loan program that's been implemented by the state. That's another source of money that we could get funding for. But bigger picture on rural healthcare, like we need to remove a lot of the mandates and the requirements on rural hospitals. There's, seismic retrofits that are required. Our hospitals have more danger from fire and flood than they do from seismic, and yet we're requiring them to meet these really hefty mandates that are very costly. They go through all kinds of agencies they have to work through just to make any changes, at a rural hospital, to update it, to modernize it. Those are really costly. Like, those are things that we need to actually change to make it easier for you to operate, a rural hospital. And then the last thing is reimbursements. It's crazy that like you could go to one clinic and you'll get a better reimbursement, but then you go to the hospital and they just get Medi-Cal reimbursement and it's really low. Why? The patient is the same, right? And so I think we need to figure out how to equalize sort of that reimbursement. There's different programs that reimburse differently. FQHCs, federally qualified health centers versus Indian Health versus Medicaid, right? Well, how do we make sure that like no matter where you go, like that provider is going to get a reasonable reimbursement to provide that care? Because if you're not providing it, a lot of people are just going to go, hey man, this doesn't work. And the reason why rural hospitals fail is because many people are on Medicaid, right? And so many people are going into that ER. And you talk to any hospital administrator, like what they get reimbursed on Medicaid is like, it does not cover the costs. And that's why ERs are just like, they're crushing, for hospitals. But if we can get more and more people going to clinics and doing preventative care and that reimbursement is a fair reimbursement, right? We can prevent people from ending up in the ER. We can prevent people. We can actually make people healthier. And man, I'm going on way too long, but there's food systems,
a big
another
problem,
issue.
so.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
yeah.
appreciate the emphasis on
Yeah.
healthcare. I
Right.
think that's so that's something you would put front and center in your term.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be a big focus of mine.
And you also mentioned earlier with sites and this as well, just bureaucracy and red tape. And, just being in the construction world, I really, I go more towards like projects.
You
but
know exactly what that's like.
Yeah. No, and I just think about like, it'll be really interesting once it's all said and done, or maybe you've already kind of studied the numbers, but like how much out of, if it's $1 billion project or whatever it is, I'm sure it's more billions than that, but it's like what % of it is actual like work, like moving dirt and like building versus like admin and like all of the junk that had to happen over the last 12 years. If, it's like what %? Like, I mean, my guess is it's pretty high. Gets spent on things other than moving dirt.
It's crazy. I mean, well, look, high-speed rail, Exhibit A, right? I mean, we've now spent over $15 billion on that project, right? And they haven't even laid a single track, right? I mean, if you look at the budget and you look at where money's gone, and audit after audit has kind of shown so many problems with this project, but it's going to pay consultants, it's going to administrative costs, but not actual let's build the thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Like just get it done. Yeah.
And then you wonder why people say, and here's the other thing, this is outrageous, but it's a fact and people need to know it. We are making high-speed rail project the #1 priority for funding right now. And we put wildfire funding last. And that was done by one of my opponents in this race, Mike McGuire. He was a co-author of this legislation that did that. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This is the fund that part of your gas price goes into, right? You're paying the highest gas prices in the nation. Part of that is a cap and trade fee. And it goes into this fund called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Now, for years, folks like myself have been saying, hey, if you want to reduce emissions, from a climate standpoint, get out in the forest and reduce all the dead and dying trees and make it a healthy forest again where it's a carbon sink. And it's not just me saying that, that's actually the Legislative Analyst Office. Our research organization in the legislature has said, dollar for dollar, that's probably the best way you can spend your money. It's better than like solar mandates and all these other things that we do. But that's been like always lowest on the totem pole. And in this legislation, it became last. Tier 3 funding is wildfire prevention. And #1 is this high-speed rail project that they can't even figure out how to get to step 1 on, I mean, and so this is the problem is like we could do so many more, I think we could do so much better. First of all, if we got our fiscal house in order and we started managing projects in a smarter way, right? Making sure they're actually meeting performance metrics that, hey, where are we at on this thing? Is this feasible? Is this budget still workable? I mean, you do that all the time in your own business, right? Like you sharpen the pencil. Like government needs to do the same thing. And this is one of our big problems.
Yeah, it's crazy when you go to the Central Valley and you think you start a project from point A and then you just move until you finish to point B, but you've got part of it here, part of it there. It just looked like just spots here and there. It's crazy on how this state has gone about with that project. You mentioned gas prices, crazy right now.
Right.
Can you break down kind of like on the taxes we pay and what are ways that, that you can help lower this, not in California, but across the nation? Because it's, I think gone up $2-3 a gallon over the last, 3 months, 2-3 months. So.
Right. Well, it starts with you pay in California at least $1.28 more for your gas just in fees, taxes, and regulations. So that's just regulatory costs that you're paying. So that is why we're almost always close to $2 higher than like the national average, out here in California. The other part is we've made ourselves into an energy island. We haven't built new pipelines to transmit either oil or gas. And so we rely a lot now on imported oil or refined gas. And now that's even more so because we've lost 2 refineries now on the West Coast that have been shut down, and those refineries closed down because of the new regulations that Gavin Newsom put in place when he so-called jammed the legislature with his gas gouging scheme, if you will. Shortly after that, 2 refineries closed down and said, hey, we can't do business in California anymore. 18% of our refined gas went away, including jet fuel that our military bases rely upon. And so like all that is what really goes into it. It started with the gas tax. We increased the gas tax. I voted no, and the Democratic supermajority passed it through. Now that's 71 cents a gallon. And they tell you it's because, hey, we need that to help make sure your roads are really good. But we look around and our local roads are not really that good. Like where's the money going? And again, like you were paying over 70 cents a gallon in a gas tax. By the way, the federal gas tax is only 18 cents, a gallon, right? But here in the state, you're paying 71 cents and they tell you, hey, it's because we want to make sure you're driving over good roads. And we can all look around and see like, that isn't the case, man. Like, so we're not even getting the benefit, of those higher taxes, right? And so that's very frustrating. The least we could do right now is suspend cap and trade when it comes to gas, and we could actually at least reduce the state excise tax on gas to give everybody relief right now. I mean, even with the war on, and a lot of people are making, hay out of the Iran war, and it certainly has had an impact on our oil and gas prices. But on the East Coast, they're paying $4 a gallon, and we're paying $6. That's because of policy. That's because of California policy, period, end of story. And there's things we could do that could give people real relief right now. Let's do it, And it's not even just me saying, now some of the Democratic candidates for governor are saying we should suspend the gas tax. Like, so it's a reasonable thing to do, but Gavin Newsom continues to say, no, I won't do it. And we're all paying the price.
I really appreciate that that compromise and that working across the aisle is another thing that's front and center to your ability to get things done, and that there are some issues that you will stand for and won't compromise as much on that are important to the North State here.
Right.
I'm curious to hear a little about your method for bringing people to the table, maybe on an issue that you're going to need to change some minds on, right, that we want to stand on here in Northern California. How do we get folks to see your side?
Yeah, so water rights is one of them, man. Like I'm never going to compromise our water rights, that help protect our communities up here. And one of the ways I help show people why that's important is like bringing them out into the district and seeing farms and seeing what we do up here. And you know what? When you do that, like the light bulbs sort of come on. I've been on a tour bus where we drive through rice country and they're seeing like all these birds, migratory waterfowl that come through, like, wow, okay. And a lot of these people, and here's the other thing. This is one of the problems with California is like most of the legislators, they're from very urban places, right? They've never actually even seen, and most of their lives have been spent in a place that's just completely urbanized, concrete jungle, right? Their rivers, the LA River, right, is concrete. Like it's not like rivers up here. And so you show them this, right? And they're like, wow, man, this is what's going on out here. And yeah, not a whole lot of houses, right? But like a lot of habitat and farming. And then you go and show them like, here's what these people do. And they need tractors, right? And they need trucks to bring that food to you. And here's the processing facility. Here's the walnut huller. Here's the rice dryer. And it starts to I think the light bulbs start to go off a bit, and it's not obviously an overnight process. Like, folks like myself and Doug and Brian and Megan Daly and now Heather Hadwick have it's been many years of doing this, right? Doug actually famously put Karen Bass on a rice harvester, Karen Bass, mayor of LA, who's got a lot of, she's having a bad media moment, I think, at the moment. But, brought her up. Someone from urban Los Angeles put her on a rice harvester. And, she still remembers that, right? These are the kinds of things I think we can do to kind of, get people to see more of our things. But at the same time, it has been really frustrating to see like our area just get completely ignored, and like, so they can see that, and then they still just pass policies that like mandate that we have to get rid of our trucks, right? Or pass policies that like, make it really hard to farm, right? And you're like, hey man, didn't you just see like this is where we're at, and we're not. And I also try to point out, I was like, hey, our profit margins aren't like through the roof here, man. Like, in fact, right now we're losing money, like big time in walnuts and almonds, and rice. And so I try to explain to them, like, it doesn't work. Like, we can't charge more for the Big Mac, right? Like, our price is whatever it is. It's determined by a world market. And so every single thing you add to us makes it harder. And so, one point of commonality I'll point out, and this, maybe seems a little off, but I think they really come together, is like our school lunch program, right? Like, why is it that we're bringing stuff in from all over the place and not like here, our local food grown by our farmers, right? I'm really trying to work on this issue. Like, how do we build up the infrastructure? And because a lot of people will say, man, I want local food. I want to make sure I know where it comes from. And meanwhile, we got like ultra processed food in the school lunch program. Like, why? Like, I could bring you in, fresh peaches and rice and prunes and, everything that we grow in the North State, right? Walnuts and almonds. Like, we need to build that up better. And I think there's ways to do that. It would be good for obviously our community, our health, right? Our kids, and it'd be good for farmers, right? So I think there's things that we can do on that front that maybe will bring people together in a positive way.
And you're kind of touching along the side of it, but you have an example, or you hear a good idea from the other side of the aisle, and you go, man, there's something that most folks on my side of the aisle aren't into, and you're like, hey, I'm gonna jump on board with that, and it's not one of those things that I'm like, hey, this is the brick wall. This is something that's, hey, I'm willing to listen to the other side and understand like why that's important to you, and I see you got some good points. And I don't know, to me, I think that's the nature of politics that we've kind of lost, of like, hey, let's reach across the aisle. Let me help you get something through, and we can, help each other out when it's, you kind of got to put a coalition sometimes together. So I don't know if you have any examples of stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been many different things. One I will highlight, I think, is on housing, where when I first came in, I had a colleague that ran a bill that was like, hey, let's just have a straight up CEQA exemption, California Environmental Quality Act exemption for housing, because we need to build a lot of housing. Like, let's spark that and like remove some of the barriers, like frivolous lawsuits and other things that come in and process barriers, bureaucracy that get in the way. That it died in its first committee. But over the years, I saw that like more urban members, we're starting to see how much of a problem it was. Even like in, say, San Francisco, where they had a project they wanted to do, and then someone brought a lawsuit, and it was like, say, high-rise apartments that they wanted, right? And the project got killed. And so I started hearing them complaining about the issue. And then, some of their members started putting forth different bills, and I said, okay, like, we want this too. And a lot of my conversations in there were like, okay, cool, you need to do this for your urban area. Our area is different. I don't necessarily need San Francisco type infrastructure and building, but I do. But we have housing that we need to build, out in the rural parts of the area. And like, so I want this to work for us too, right? And so a lot of my conversations would be about like, okay, do this helps you, but also here's the things that would help us, where our housing is going to probably be less like apartments, some apartments, right? But we need to build a lot of single family homes as well. And so, hasn't been a perfect science, right? Yeah. But it's been, we've actually passed several bills now on housing that have removed some of those barriers, and I think have made it easier to build more housing, both in urban areas and rural areas. And I'm proud of that work, and I think we can do even more, as we continue to move, in sort of this new coalition of the willing, if you will, that is Republican and Democrat.
Yeah, I remember when Newsom first came into office, and he was just talking about, he came up with a number of housing units that he thought needed to be built, and it's just
3 million.
Yeah, I think it was 5, and I think
Was it 5?
It keeps lowering, and anyways,
He didn't get anywhere close. I know that.
I know,
And but I think we're definitely in a better place now with some of the legislation that's been
Yep.
passed. But go
But
ahead.
I think that's one of those things you can look at and go, hey, let's, there's something we can agree on. We need more housing.
Yeah.
And I also find it interesting that people don't want to connect. Like obviously people who are homeless a lot of them have other issues, but they also don't have a home, and we don't have very much vacancy, like almost none. So it's like, well, don't you think if we had more vacancy and more houses, more people would be in them? So I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
Totally.
one of my
Yeah.
one of my pet peeves. So
James, you've been in office now, state 12 years, and for a long time. How should the public measure your success in this role?
I think that I would ask people to just look at, hey, what have we been able to do together, and look at that more locally, right, than say statewide, right? Because I think we all share, like, there's a lot of frustrations that I have and other people have, like, man, I wish things were different out of state policy, right? Gas prices and such, right? But I'd say, hey, what did we do together? And here's the things I would point to. We came out of some really terrible disasters, the Oroville Dam spillway crisis, the Camp Fire, the Dixie Fire, and we came together as a community and we helped people recover. We provided much needed oversight at Oroville Dam that had never been there before. We built more housing. We actually built more affordable housing. And one of the ways we did that was Doug and I working together, helping to ensure we got, CDBG, DR, disaster relief funds to build more housing. We got a greater share of tax credits. And it made for these sort of public-private partnerships, essentially, where people could come in and build more of that housing stock, right? We helped ensure that infrastructure got rebuilt, the water system in Paradise, right? We've been working on, hey, how do we develop a sewer system, for the town, at least for the downtown portion of the town. I'd ask them to look at, hey, what were we able to do, from a regulatory standpoint in terms of getting people to recognize we need to have more water on the landscape, for wildfire survivors, like making sure that there should be no taxes on their settlement payments that they receive, from PG&E. I'd say, hey, look at what we've been able to do together, just as stakeholders, right? Bringing together stakeholders to do good things in our communities. Career technical education, getting our kids into, programs that help provide for a productive life for them, welding programs and logging programs, actually, forestry management. These are all nursing. Here in the North State, Chico State has a great nursing program, for example. But all these things, I think, have been, ways that we've helped make lives better for people. And to me, that's what it's ultimately about, is like, hey, are you working to, make people's quality of life better? Or is it making it worse? And I think that we've been able to do that. And it's probably been more on a localized level of trying to find ways. But even being in the minority in Sacramento, we've been able to get things through that I think we wouldn't otherwise have been able to accomplish.
I think you nailed it with the whole community thing. That's that's what we all look at. And when we see our congressmen or our senators, they always think about these national things. And
right.
I want to see more. I don't really care about what's going on the East Coast or I want to care about what's here in my community where a difference can be made. And I want speaking for myself, and I know a lot of people that we want a representative to look at what's going here, not have just a natural disaster to bring the community together, but to have that all the time. It's a good feeling.
Absolutely, yeah. And as we sit here on Main Street in downtown Chico, we've watched a lot of our friends and neighbors lose their businesses very recently. I'm curious to hear a little bit about your vision for economic development in this community.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big issue. And I mean, one is like we have technological changes, you know, where people are obviously ordering online a lot more. And there's, you know, those kinds of things going on that I think have hurt Main Street. And then you have just regulatory policies, you know, that have made life more expensive for a small business, right? You know, we talked about fuel costs, but I mean, permitting costs and all the different things that you put, you know, I mean, California small businesses deserve a badge of honor, man. Like, I mean, if you can make it in California's business and regulatory climate, like you are a champ. So congratulations to all of you. You know, but that, so you have that component going on as well. And then I think it's like, hey, how do we, you know, how do we navigate some of these things by providing better resources, right? And helping people get maybe access to technology and the use of it so that they can, you know, strengthen their business and endure, you know, through some of these changes. So I think what I would do is sort of twofold. One is try to get greater investments, probably through the Small Business Administration, SBA, in helping businesses navigate sort of this new revolution that we're in with AI and all these things, right? And so that businesses have those resources, but then also like, let's reduce that regulatory burden and like, and give real relief to small business owners so they can survive, right? And I do. I think it's so important that we still maintain Main Street, right? Some of that's also like coming together as communities and talking about how important that is. That, hey man, like buy local, right? Like go to your local business. You don't have to, you know, order that Amazon that Amazon package, right? Yeah. Or if you're going to do it, order it from a local business, right? Yeah. You know, to get that brought to you. And so I think some level of education needs to. The convenience of our technology right now is not always good for community, right? And I think we got to somehow like, you know, break through that. And I think that's through public education. It's through, you know, community education. But then also like giving people the resources to sort of navigate this brave new world, if you will.
Yeah, you're touching on technology and man, with kids, you know, we've got kids that are young and just, you know, there's been a lot of talk lately just about censorship and like how, you know, some rules around that and just keeping tabs on that. Do you have any thoughts on, I have been seeing definitely, we kind of swung really far one direction where it's new thing, and it feels like, I mean, seeing ads about. I was at a movie the other day, and I actually saw an ad that was like, "Get off your phone, get off." You know, it was like being like, "Hey, online's not a healthy place for you to be." And so, anyways, I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on like how do we like, you know, stay free but also have some rules around that kind of topic.
Right. I mean, I think it's like things we've seen before, and yet not like, right? I mean, it's new, right? But when we have technological advances that happen really quickly, I think we have to find that right space of how do you reasonably regulate it without stifling it, without stifling innovation. And I think that's like the sweet spot we have to find here with AI and with, you know, obviously with social media and all the new ways that people are communicating and getting information. So for me, like I favor things that are like reasonable regulations, like, yeah, hey man, you shouldn't be targeting kids, you know, with certain messages, and we need to have some better parental controls and the ability for parents to consent as to whether or not, you know, their child is going on, you know, a platform that has access to everything, right? I ran a bill, and I was one of the first people to do this, to have parental consent for kids under 13. Actually, I started with 16, with kids under 16 to have parental consent before they can, you know, get on a social media site. And we actually passed that bill. And that was a struggle, man. I'll tell you, I got killed on the assembly floor at one point because the representative that represented Silicon Valley was obviously against it. And he rallied people and stopped it. And the very next year I came back, we got a bipartisan coalition, passed it, got it through the Senate, got to the governor's desk, and guess what? Gavin Newsom vetoed it. It didn't get a lot of press. Like, I feel like nobody's ever talked about this, but I got that bill, to him. And now the governor is saying, I support bans on no kids on social media at all, right? I'm like,
Now it's his idea.
I'm like, hey man, like, first of all, and I don't know that it needs to be outright banned. I just think we need to have better controls on it, right? And we need to have, regulation, because, I mean, you talk to a lot of kids, like, actually in some ways this is really beneficial to them. Like, it gives them access to information. It helps them better, like, research things. Like, there's a lot of benefits, right? But there's also negative aspects, right? And a lot of that, I think, is with the algorithm and how that's like, marketing to kids and the ideas that come into kids' heads that can be damaging, right? So you have to have, I think it's like a reasonable regulation of this new technology, but not a stifling of it, right? I mean, the Biden administration was going to take AI and say, hey, there's only going to be 3 companies that can do AI, right? That's crazy. I mean, that'll be monopoly. First of all, it's like picking winners and losers, right? But it's like, no, let's ensure there's innovation that people can use, but let's safeguard this too, right? We don't want to have deep fakes that are misrepresenting what somebody really is saying or doing, or misrepresenting real facts, right? Like, we can have regulation on that, but at the same time, we can allow like this AI revolution to take place in ways that's going to allow you to like do business more efficiently, right? That's going to allow you to like, researchers to gather more information in a quicker way so that we can come up with solutions, right? I mean, the idea here, and it's not an easy mix, I know that, but it's like, that's what we need. You need to have policymakers who are thinking about what's the right balance of regulation on this. It can't be a wild, wild west, right? The thing I maybe liken to it most is like the railroads, right? Railroads started going crazy, and they gave them way too much leeway, right? And the railroad robber barons sort of took over, and man, you gave them an inch and they took a mile, right? And eventually some good government reformers had to come in, right, and say, no, man, we need to have regulation of this, and you can't just allow this to happen and have monopolies and things that are destructive, to business and commerce. Let's have a reasonable, regulation. So I think the same thing needs to happen here.
Mr. Gallagher, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. As we wind down, I want to give you a minute to give us your closing thoughts, and then we will let you on your way.
Yeah, well, this has been a good conversation, and I think I talked too much, and I'm sorry. You guys gave some good and thought-inspiring questions, really, and really, I mean, you and I have just gotten to know each other. I've known these 2 gentlemen for a while. I'm just really like honored about the time that I've been able to have, working with you guys on different things, and really the Chico business community, I think, has always been really forward thinking, and I think in the broad spectrum of things, we've been able to actually do a lot of good things, man. I think of some of the things you've done on the housing front, and innovative ideas,
Trying.
and
Truly.
and restoring the historic Black church, over here,
AME,
which I thought was AME, which I thought was driving by that, I go, man, I'm so glad that you did that and that people came together to do that.
It was a cool, just an example of what community, should be.
Bring people together, right?
Yep,
and to do something positive. And I mean, I feel like there's been a lot of things like that. I remember like one of the first people I really got to know is Michael Daly and Giovanni Triceri. And I remember when I first met with them, they were talking about stewardship. And I think that's a concept that's always stuck with me, is like, really what we're trying to do here is steward our communities, right? We're not trying to rule them. We're not trying to like mandate they do this thing, right? Or try to just, hey, let's come together, let's steward this community in a better way, right? And maybe regardless of what's going on, like, cause I've always, I fought hard against, the prevailing winds in Sacramento. And I think that's important, because we do need a better way forward, right? But what can we do even regardless of what may be happening outside of us, right? Like, what can we do together? And I think that's a thing that I've always really enjoyed being a part of. And I think I've been able to lead some of those efforts. And then other times I've just been like Doug, sometimes like, hey, I just want to be right here with you and walk alongside you and trying to figure that out. That's the important thing. And it's something I want to continue to do, and hopefully in this role as a congressman for this area.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for following your own guiding light of showing up to the communities where we want to hear your thoughts. Thank you for showing up.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Right. Yeah,
Appreciate you, James,
likewise.
and all you do.
Yeah.
Thank you.